Last week, Reuters broke the news that the World Health Organization's Cancer Research Agency, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, plans to declare the artificial sweetener aspartame a possible carcinogen. The move would drastically alter the food service industry, as this classification would indicate to consumers that aspartame could cause cancer. However, some big questions still remain. How likely is it that aspartame actually causes cancer? And how much diet pop would you have to drink to increase your cancer risk? Joining us now to discuss the potential link between aspartame and cancer is Bill Wirtz, journalist and senior policy analyst with the Consumer Choice Center. Given the agency's plan to reclassify the substance, should consumers be worried about aspartame?
No, they shouldn't be. Aspartame has been a safe sweetener that has been approved in Canada and many other jurisdictions since about the 1980s. So there's about 200 studies that show the safety of aspartame as a sweetener. And actually, I think the debate is a little silly that has been started by the International Agency for Research on Cancer because it distracts us from the actual problem that we were trying to solve with sweeteners, which is sugar. People should be reducing their sugar intake, and this has been the way to do it. And also, sweeteners are very important if you're, for instance, a diabetic. So, no, people should not be concerned about the intake of aspartame.
So, if aspartame is relatively harmless, why does the IARC classify it as a possible carcinogen?
So, the reason that the International Agency for Research on Cancer does a different classification than literally every other health body in the world is because they take a different approach to assessing harm. So here we get into sort of, I think this is interesting for your audience, the difference between hazard and risk. So in the English language, hazard and risk are these are trivial differences between those two words, but in science it does make a significant difference. Hazard is the potential that something can harm you. Risk is the likelihood that it will. So just to illustrate this for you, during the summer, you go out in the sun, and the sun is a hazard because it can cause a sunburn or you can get a sunstroke. But the way consumers manage that risk is by reducing the exposure or applying sunscreen. So this is why it is a hazard, but not a risk. And so in this instance, what we have to look at is the actual exposure. Like, what is the dosage that would be problematic for you? And in the case of aspartame, a person with the weight of about 60 kilogram would have to drink 12 to 36 cans of Diet Coke a day for an extended period of time. And my take is, if you drink that much Diet Coke, you might have a few other problems as well.
What else has the IARC given a 2B classification to?
Yeah, so the classifications are interesting. So there's four classifications, number 1 and 3. So there's this 1, 2A, 2B, and 3. 1 and 3 are the strong evidence ones. So number 1 is all the things that can cause cancer, that we know cause cancer, and number 3 is the one that we know do not cause cancer. 2A and 2B are a bit more ambiguous because both of them are described as possibly and probably. And they do quite a lot of heavy lifting in there. So for instance, in 2B, you have pickled Asian vegetables. So if you're enjoying kimchi, that is also a high carcinogenic risk. And actually a higher carcinogenic risk is what I'm doing with you right now. As you can see in my background, it's already dark. I am in Europe, and working at night is considered 2A on the carcinogenic risk level for people. So I think what we're doing here is sort of blurring the line on risk perception for consumers.
What would happen health wise if consumers shifted back to drinks that are not artificially sweetened?
So if you tell consumers that aspartame causes cancer, because a lot of consumers will just read the headline, they will do one of two things. Either they will say, well, aspartame is very dangerous, I'm going back to sugar. And that's the problem we were trying to solve in the first place, for people not to consume as much sugar in their sweet drinks. Or what they can also do is they might conclude, look, if aspartame causes cancer and cigarettes cause cancer, well then, maybe all of this is a bit overblown and cigarettes are actually not that bad for me. So by relativizing those risks, we're actually giving consumers a very bad perception on the actual risk factors that surround them. Because let's be honest, a lot of people saw this news, they just saw the headline, and now they're ditching their diet soda, which is actually not what this should be about.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We have to go to break, but when we return, we will be shifting our focus to the latest developments in Hong Kong. Hong Kong officials have demanded that dissidents living abroad should turn themselves in for prosecution, including some who currently live in Canada. Joining us to discuss is Dr. Charles Burton, China expert and senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute.